Welcome, everyone, to Software Sales Simplified, Move to Success, the podcast for enterprise sales professionals who want to grow their business and improve customer engagement. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, make our show your go-to resources for effective selling strategies and insights that work. So join us right here wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and we'll move to success together. I'm Kevin Donville, your host, and I'm joined by my co-host, good friend, and co-author, Matt Long. Matt, give us a quick hello there.
Hey, everyone. It's good to be here.
Now, Matt and I have over 50 years experience in the world of enterprise software sales and services delivery. We share our thoughts with you on this podcast, and we've also put them into a book called Winning Faster, the Move Framework for Enterprise Sales Success. If you'd like to get a copy of the information, will be in the description for this podcast or off of our website, strategicsalesoptimization.com. But for today, we've got a guest with us here on the show, a person that both Matt and I have had the privilege of working with together in the past, a gentleman by the name of Tony Marshall. Tony Marshall is an ultra long distance running enthusiast, on top of being just an awesome seller. But in his current role, he's also revolutionized the property insurance sector with his unique approach to efficiency and customer satisfaction, which we'll be getting into all of those topics over our session today. Tony, sir, great to see you. It's been a long time.
It's great to be here and see you guys and see what you guys have developed here. This is pretty awesome. I appreciate the invite and being able to join you all.
Well, we're so happy to have you. You and I used to work together quite a bit out in the field. I know Matt's had the privilege of working with you as well. But you're off in a new venture now. Give everybody an idea of where it is you are now and some of the stuff you've been doing at your new gig.
Yeah, so the company I'm working at right now is called Handy, and what we've done is we've created a better experience coming from that experience background that we used to do in our previous role. But what we're doing is connecting the homeowners and insurance companies to fast track the property claims, right? So if you think about the current process, if you have a leak in your laundry room, you're calling the adjuster, you're waiting for them to come out there, they're going to give you a quote, and then you're going to try to find a contractor to do that job for that price. It's going to be kind of hard, right? Or the other option is go get 3 quotes and we'll see what we could do. No contractor wants to come out and just give an estimate. They want the job. So that takes forever. It's a huge sales cycle. And it's just a pain for the customer and for the insurance company. So we've come in and condensed all of that for the customer and do the estimate for the carrier, as well as take care of the rebuild for the customer. They don't have to open up their wallet, and everything kind of gets done at a condensed time and gets the customer back to normal, right? So that's the idea there. It's been fun.
It sounds like a bit of a departure from your traditional jobs that you've had previously, right? Around enterprise sales, B2B, things like that. How is that, I would say, transition, or how's it been to kind of sell to different audiences? And what's that like? Yeah.
So if I look back in my career, I've been in software sales. And when you mentioned that, you guys, how long you've been doing this? 25 years. So I was roughly around 22 when I got into, a startup back in the Bay Area. But I've sold into travel, HR, IT, but the bulk of it's been into marketing, right? And with you guys as well. And then this opportunity came along like, hey, do you want to sell into insurance? I don't know anything about insurance. It's like, that's okay. We're just trying to drive a great experience for the customer and the carrier and the contractor, right? And I was like, well, I know about experience. That's what we were trying to do, is solve those problems with some of these big enterprise companies at our previous role, right? Identify the problem, how many people it was affecting, and how can we make that experience better? So kind of having that mentality ingrained over 6 years, right? And then coming into this new role, I'm like, well, I can work with that. Like, I know what I'm trying to do here, and convey that to the insurance companies, and then get the contractors to join us and explain why it's a better experience to work in our network of contractors than with other networks. So it was became a nice transition. And then I thought insurance might be boring, but it's been fun. The stories you can imagine hearing from contractors on the insurance side, it keeps it interesting every day. It's been real fun. But Matt, to your point, there is some differences, but that enterprise sales is still there, right? We're targeting the largest insurance companies in the country, and we want them to use our software to help streamline their claim process while driving a better experience for their customer. And so there is that long, prolonged sales cycle that we have in the enterprise, where you're building that relationship There's multiple people that are going to be involved in the decision making. So that's been kind of unique or similar. But what's unique about this too is the contractor side. So I get to roll up my sleeves and dial for dollars, right? Contractors aren't at the computer. They're out on a job, on a roof. They have their cell phone next to them. So they actually pick up the phone and check their email. It's the reverse of what we've been doing for a while. So it's fun to be able to kind of go old school and dial for dollars right off a Rolodex almost. So it kind of keeps it interesting. So I actually talk to people on the phone, and I also have scheduled meetings and Zoom calls. So it's a little bit of everything, which makes it fun and entertaining.
That's great. What skills would you say that you developed over the years that are most coming into play now?
What comes to mind was a job that I had, and it's funny that you asked that. You had him on your podcast recently, Richard Harris. So he was a former boss of mine, and that was probably my second job. And you could call it a boiler room. It was old school. I literally got my training done. He sat me down by a phone and literally had a Rolodex with a bunch of like business cards from other reps that went to trade shows. And I was just spinning that around. And the goal is, once you figured out the formula, he said, if you dial 100 dials a day, call it, and then you're going to be able to reach X amount of people, and then you're going to get X amount of deals. It was you had a formula, and if you did that, you hit your number. And being an athlete, I've always been coachable. So to me, I was like, okay, all right, if I do that, and that, I'm going to see success. Now, what if I go beyond, right? So I want to overachieve and get into those bonuses and so forth. So he really instilled in me that whole just, you got to grind, right? Nothing's going to come easy, and the whole not waiting for leads to come inbound, but trying to really go after. So that role, I'm glad I had that opportunity to dial for dollars. So I really appreciate the inbounds as well. And I felt like that really kind of set me up for success to kind of get into the other enterprise sales roles that I had.
One thing I want to ask, just how responsive are people to telephone? Contractors are a specific segment of people that are very phone-based.
Yeah.
I have problems getting my friends on the phone. I mean, everyone wants to text all the time. And I'm a person, maybe a little old school, but it's like, if we've gone back and forth to 3 texts, I'm picking up the phone. I'm not going to sit here and try to explain everything over text. We could solve the thing in a 3-minute conversation, but it's really hard to do. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, being in sales and starting off calling people, and then being in enterprise sales for a while where maybe they weren't responding, and now to an industry where they are, what's that like, and what changes have you seen?
If we go over the last 25 years, picking up the phone and calling was the norm, right? And then you started to learn how to call and hide your ID, right? I forget what number that was. You dialed something beforehand so they wouldn't know you're calling, and then you'd be able to get through that way, right? And then that slowly started, they started getting smarter. They wouldn't pick up the phone. So then email kind of came into the play, right? And then with email, then you had LinkedIn and trying to connect that for a little while. LinkedIn, like, this is the new way to get their attention. And then now I feel like it's transitioned the majority into relationships, right? And connections. And Kevin, you talk about building out your brand, your social media presence. I mean, that's part of it too, right? So people get to know you in different ways. They don't want to talk to you on the phone. They want to see, okay, who is this person? What does their company do? Do I have everything? Okay, now I'm comfortable responding to them. But it's taking a lot more. I still think there's a place for calling, but it's not going to be cold calling. So if I call an executive at one of these insurance companies and they actually picked up, I will get why are you calling? Right? Like, I don't want that. It's knowing where and when. Now, others that I've developed relationships that I'm in the middle of a sales cycle with, I could probably pick up the phone. I might text them first, say, hey, you got a minute? And then hop on there. But it's definitely transition. But on the contractor side, if I can email them 10 times, I won't get a response. Right. Pick up the phone. It's a normal conversation. So it's definitely, I wouldn't say I would eliminate it completely, because if you've tried every single means to get through to someone, they're not picking up, they're not responding, referral's not working, maybe a phone call. I don't know. You can try that as well. You have nothing to lose at that point, but you got to get creative nowadays to get through to someone.
Well, it's interesting you were mentioning that, because it's a topic we've discussed with a number of the guests, including Richard, who you just identified a moment ago. You've been in the game almost as long as we have, and I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some of the biggest things you've seen change in the industries, particularly with respect to selling and doing it effectively, maybe like the last 5 years, and what are your strategies to deal with those changes?
Yeah. I would say, call it even the last 5 to 8 years, especially in enterprise sales. It used to be you'd be able to close the deal and move on, right? You got that deal, you potentially can get them locked in for 2 years right off the bat. And that became harder and harder to do. It became more of, well, let's do a pilot, right? We used to hate that term. We're like, no, not a pilot. That's going to stretch things out. And it just created a longer sales process. But that became the norm, right? Okay, let's do a pilot. Let's do an engagement. Let's define what that engagement is. So you can't just move on and then go to the next deal. So you're baiting in that. You and I would be trying to, nurture this deal, set expectations and timelines so that when it came time to, okay, this pilot's completed, it's a no-brainer. Let's sign off and lock them in for 2 years if we've hit these milestones. So I think that's become more and more of the norm. It's, let's try it before we buy it kind of approach versus anyone going all in on a 7-figure deal. I don't see those happening as much as they used to. In my space, it might be, let's work on one region, right? A big carrier that's nationwide. We'll start off with, we're just going to give you mitigation claims or just roof claims or content claims. See how you perform. And then, you guys do well there. Let's open it up to all the adjusters across the country so they can use your service. So it's always been kind of it's just a different model nowadays that you have to kind of walk through. So there's always different approach.
Well, is that because the customers themselves, I mean, obviously it's a change to their buying process, but is that because their expectation up front is they have a higher threshold of proof that they need to see or validation? What has changed on the buyer side, do you think, that's driving that trend?
If I had to look back at some of these things, some of the things are mission critical that we're selling, right? So there isn't really a budget there, especially at the level that we're trying to go after. So having that proof of concept put in place really validates that budget request, call it at the end of the year, right? So if you're able to get a pilot running and your proof, you have an ROI that's been proven out, then getting that bigger budget will come into play. So for me personally, some of the things I've been selling historically kind of fall within that, not as mission critical as we'd want it to be, even though we try to build that out to be like, hey, you need this because you're using X amount. That doesn't necessarily always resonate with them without this process. And then some companies, they have a proof of concept team. You have to run it through. So you have no choice. There's no way of avoiding it, right? I know that one of the companies you and I met down in Brazil with, our previous role, they had a proof of concept team, and it's just, there's no way around it. So you had to kind of deal with that.
So today's sellers, what's the main thing they need to focus on doing differently, since that's the customer expectation these days, than maybe even 5 years ago from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, more than ever now, it's discovery, understanding who's in the buying process, like what are going to be the roadblocks along the way, truly understand the pain point, not just of the person you're talking to, but the executive, what they want. So it's really painting a full picture before you commit to getting into a pilot. And then understanding like, hey, an agreement here of your sequence of events. So Eric Holt was huge on sequence of events, right? What are your sequence of events to get these deals done? Before you commit that, I want to know you have these all checked off, right? So he instilled that in us. And it was one of those things where like you really need to have those locked in, and you have to have buy-in from the decision maker and the person that connecting the POC to really make that a successful pilot. So you do get that contract on the timeline that you're looking for.
It's funny you would say that, because Matt and I, that's a very large portion of our methodology. There's a whole area of that we've dedicated our methodology to. So the concept of opportunity, which is not just understanding what they profess and describe to you as being their buying process, or what does their buying cycle look like and the different steps that make it up, but what's the real one, and being able to go through that whole process of understanding sequence of events, understanding causality, and looking for the weak spot in the chain. So I think that Matt and I are in kind of wholehearted agreement with you about that observation. I do see that as being a major change as well in selling strategies across the board. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree that there's a lot of changes that have occurred over the years. And I also think that, having to prove out even after you sell that they're getting value is something that's changed with SAT, right? It's like, because before, I mean, back in the day, it was perpetual license. You sell that one big deal, and then there's just, 20% maintenance, and you just kind of
move on.
like you said, washed your hands and moved on, right? But now because the stakes are so high, I mean, it's the same ACV, right? Every year. If not, you try to grow it too because of, increased costs or increased usage, et cetera. That conversation gets harder and harder. It's like, okay, well, now we're spending more. We've not even seen the value from last year. Why would you, so that's been a lot different for sure.
Yeah, I remember those stories. Yeah. You want me
I'd
to
like to
renew?
kind of pivot a little bit and just talk about how did you get into sales originally? I mean, what were you always
Yeah.
a seller, or how did you stumble across that? I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
I mean, this go way back, but like all the way to my childhood, right? So I was an army brat. My dad, had us moving across the country. I had the opportunity to live in Brazil multiple times. My dad was stationed in Brazilian, worked at the U.S. Embassy. So every time I moved, I had to make new friends. So kind of I'm a people person, right? So I've never been afraid to make new friends and meet new people. So I was always around just different people, different ethnicities, different countries, all those things. And I felt like, even the school I went to, it was an American International School of Brasilia, Brazil. And you had all the different countries that have an embassy in Brazil, they send their kids to the school. So it's just, I never knew that I was going to be a salesperson. I even went to school for international business and, with an emphasis in Latin America, thinking after that I might go, my dad was like, well, if you go apply for the State Department and work in the DEA. Before that, also, we talked about me going in the Army as well. Chose not to. I thought 7 years after college was too much to commit to back then. Now I look back, it's not too bad. But anyways, just as a people person, I thought, okay, well, at least international business, I'll get into that. That seems something I was interested in. And got back. My dad's like, after college, you need a good job. I'm down in Brazil, worked at the embassy in different departments. So as a people person, I got to approve visas at the window for Brazilians that wanted to come to the United States. So interacting with people, them telling the stories, make sure they're qualified, and they meet all the criteria in order for me to give them a stamp of approval to come into the country. Then I also got to do simultaneous translation for the U.S. Navy as they're installing a satellite dish down in Brazil and training the Brazilian Navy officers down there how to use it. Once again, on stage, simultaneous translations. That was kind of like, I love doing that. I kind of lived for that. It was fun. And then the funniest one, but it never went through, was the United States was trying to sell their McRibs in Brazil with American meat. And Brazilians are like, no, you're not going to sell American meat in a country that exports meat. So, but kind of being a part of all that, negotiations, and I didn't even know what software sales was back then, right? It wasn't a thing. And I came back after all that. I'm like, no, I don't want to work for the government. My dad's like, well, you got to get a job. Here's your first and last month's rent. You're on your own. And so I just went on Yahoo message board, whatever it was at the time, and found a gig in Sausalito. It was a reverse auction platform to negotiate hotel room rates for the Fortune 500 back in 2000.
Wow.
Hotels barely had computers. And here we are with this advanced technology that they're all going to log into and try to negotiate a hotel room rate in 30 minutes and bid against each other. And I was just a sales admin, kind of just running errands around the office. I wasn't thinking sales or anything. Anyways, and then they said, hey, do you want to start calling companies and trying to schedule meetings for us? I'm like, sure, I'll do whatever. Once again, still not thinking sales, just like I can make an appointment. And they said, well, if you get us an in-person appointment, you get $100. If it's a web demo, you get $50. I'm like, okay, I like this. I'm 22, right? And I'm like, this is awesome. I can do this. So started doing that. They booked so many meetings for them that were qualified meetings that got to the point where they could do the demos. Like, hey, come, you want to do the demos? I'm like, okay. All right. Then finally I got to go on site with them and they kind of nurtured me. Like, all right, you're getting into sales. This is now you're a full blown salesperson from start to finish. So that was I just kind of stumbled into it, but it always felt natural. Like nothing ever felt, if I was in front of people, I kind of thrived on it. So,
did you see some of those people as sort of mentors for you in terms of guiding you along or encouraging you, or it sounds like they were kind of dragging you along to that stage?
Yeah.
Do you think it was deliberate or that was just kind of organic?
I would say it was organic to a certain degree, where I really felt like we got a lot of mentoring and nurturing and helping us grow as reps, is at a job I had with Bronto Software. And that was after working with Richard Harris at PC Guardian. It was a company based here in Durham, North Carolina, which I've moved out now 3 years ago from the West Coast to the East Coast here in Raleigh. But they did such a great job taking people from the SDR level and training them and nurturing them and having them move up. I could look down on LinkedIn and see so many of these people that were SDRs and are CROs now. And I mean, it was awesome. I just got a notification for the Bronco alumni reunion in June. We all get together. Finally, I'm hoping to get to one of these, but like they did a really good job. General VP of sales at the time, George Moser, and then my director of sales, Jim Lemon, really honed in and trained us a lot when it came to discovery, to demo, and just kind of making sure to hammer the message and what you needed to do. So I feel like that foundation that I had there when I was there for 4+ really solidified me to my later job and other jobs that I worked at as well.
Bronto was that kind of email and marketing messaging platform, and they had the dinosaur as the logo. I remember.
Heck yeah. I still have my coffee. I should have my coffee mug here, but so I mean, we were to give you an idea. One of the things why we were so successful is we found our lane and we did not deviate. Right. Mm-hmm. So we were a mid-market solution at the time for the internet retailer 500, and we wanted to focus and get every single logo from 101 to 500. Now, 0 to 100 was responses and exact target, if you remember those guys, right? They were the enterprise solution. They sold to companies that had the IT infrastructure and team that could handle that. 100 to 500 were more marketing digital people that weren't so, technical, and they needed something user-friendly, and that's what we were. So when we were going after these companies, we were the best thing that I learned during that time is how to qualify myself out of a deal and not spin my wheels. So our win rates were super high. Once we got past demo, we knew we had the value to drive for them, and we had a really high win rate because we did such a good job at the discovery. And that kind of, I felt like, was the beginning of really trying to, as we always talk about, like, you don't want to just go out there and just demo and regurgitate, what you do, but it's really understanding the person's pain points and then tailoring your demo, your presentation based on that. And I felt like Bronto, what they had set up there was just awesome looking to that.
Just curious, what would you use to qualify them out? What were some of the big things that you would actually say, okay, this is not a deal that I want to go forward with?
If IT showed up to the meeting, I would literally say your best option is to go with Exact Target. They are going to be the perfect solution for you. If they started asking a lot of the technical questions, they had a team that was a bit more established where IT was involved a lot more. We're like, move along. But then there was the ones that are just all more digital on the marketing side. All the decision makers were in there. There was no influence at all from IT. Then I knew that was something we could win. And that's when I still remember when I got there, there was the first batch of us that were the first outside sales reps, right, for Bronto. Everyone else was still based here in Durham. And then our deal sizes at the time, I think we were maybe 20K was the largest deal, if that, maybe 15. And by the time I left, it was 7 figures. But I remember that whole, as we progressed and we always never went too high because enterprise always we butted up with the enterprise deals. But if you remember, you're probably familiar with Fabletics, which is owned by Just Fab. Mm-hmm. We started with them when they were just nothing, right? Tiny little Just Fab company. Fabletics was just about to start to launch. So that's how far back it went. And that became like a 7-figure deal for the company. But we got in there and it established the value, and we were working with digital, and it worked out perfect, but they had massive volume growth. But it never fell into the IT side. So we were able to stay in.
I have one quick question about that, because, you talked about how effective you guys were at being able to qualify in deals and how important discovery was there. But you also talked about something else that was in your methodology, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but really quickly, how important do you think being able to demo your own product was to your ability to effectively do the discovery and do that qualification process?
So it kind of had a little bit of a motto. If I could do the demo, if I could navigate the platform, that's how easy it is. So it was kind of that approach to marketing. So I did all my demos in that case for the most part, we didn't have to, but I had a on the more technical, I would say more, I won't say technical, but when we had a bigger deal, I had my sales engineer as well. But a lot of the times I would still do the demo, but they would answer the technical questions. So it was kind of, I felt like in that situation, it was important to show that I could do that because I'm not a technical person. Previous roles, when I was working with you all, obviously you want to be able to be that quarterback in the room and let the sales engineer there then pause and ask the technical questions and dig for more pain and so forth and read the room, right? At Bronto in that position, it wasn't as necessary. I feel like it was more just showing to the marketer that this is a very simple platform, but also powerful.
Yeah, it used to be one of my favorite sayings was, look, if an AE can demo it, anyone can do it.
And not to say it on my last role, I couldn't demo it. I was always proud that I could, and I did it in certain situations. But I knew that if one of you were there, I wouldn't have to worry.
Right. Well, we're a team for a reason because we all bring different things to it, as well as different ears when the other person is talking, which is a really key part of the AES relationship. It's not because one can't do the other, but it's because, the other one is keenly listening and watching and observing, engagements that are happening.
Exactly.
Sure.
Well, it's interesting because, what you were taught, you had a discipline with respect to the way that you guys were sticking to a very strict way of doing discovery and the way you were doing your engagement with the application and understanding how it worked. And I know you're an athlete, so and being an athlete's all about discipline. Yeah. What are some of the parallels, because you're a ultra distance runner, what are some of the parallels between that sport and what you've learned there and what that means to your life and to selling? What are some of the touch points?
Yeah. I mean, it would go, the biggest thing I would say, and this goes back to like Eric Cole, and always love the fact that I was an athlete. I played collegiate tennis and got into running afterwards, and I was cross-trained, but I've always been very coachable. And so to me, that's like, if I do something wrong, I always say, you could do something wrong once, make sure you learn so you don't do it again. I don't want to see you do it again, right? I'm like, yes, sir. But it was one of those where I felt like I always wanted to soak in more, to learn more. And I always felt like I did a good job. Even if I messed up or something, I want to be able to learn and take that feedback without being upset, which I felt like I've always had an easygoing personality. If someone said, hey, try this, I wouldn't take any offense. I'd say, thank you. But when it comes to the methodology and the way of thinking, I look at ultra running is training for a 100-mile race, right? It's or a 50-mile race, or even just a marathon. You're not gonna just get off the couch and go do it, right? There's going to be a process. You're going to have to map out your training. It could be an 8-week block. 100 miles could be a whole year that you're building up to that with different milestones where you run 50-mile races twice. You're trying different nutritions and different things, but it's the long haul. So in enterprise sales, I had some deals at our previous role where I was nurturing them for almost 2 years before we closed a deal. And that was okay. You kind of had that, and then you had your mini goals along the way, which might be smaller deals, but you always had that 100-miler stacked up, and then you had your plan to get there. What do I need to do to close that? What are the different things along the way, which include those POCs once you're in there? And so I kind of look at that mentality a little bit and how just being patient through it. And a lot of people don't like the big long sales cycles, right? They just want to they want to turn and burn and move on to the next deal. I've always enjoyed that, building relationships along the way. But I feel like with ultra running, that's kind of the correlation a little bit. It's just the discipline of, making at each step of the way and hitting those milestones.
Talk to us a little bit about the ultra marathoning or ultra run. Why on earth would anyone run 100 miles? How did it go about, and what is it like, I guess?
Yeah. So, an ultra marathon is anything over 26.2 miles. So a marathon is 26.2 miles. And running for me I kind of ran my first marathon in honor of my dad because he never found the time to be able to train for one. The longest he had done back then was, when I was a kid, was 10 miles. So I always wanted to kind of do one in honor of him. And I finished the marathon and I was like, I wonder what's longer. And all I could think of was the Ironmans and the tearjerkers on USA. If you remember USA, they'd have like the Ironman Kona that would show way back on the day. And I don't know who was the commentator, but you were always crying by the end of it. Some tearjerker, is someone stumbling across the finish line. I'm like, I don't like the bike, so I don't want to do that. Is there anything else? So then I Googled and came up with 2 races. One, which was Badwater. It's 135 miles in the middle of the summer from Badwater, Death Valley, all the way to the portal of Whitney. I'm like, that's just crazy. And then the other one is this trail behind me. It's the Western States 100, which starts at the base of Squaw Valley, goes through the mountains, all the way across down to Auburn, and it finishes there. It's the oldest 100-mile race in the country. And it basically was a race where this guy, Gordon Ainsley, he is a horse race. He basically was supposed to ride their horse all the way through. His horse came up lame, so he's asked, hey, can I run across the trail? The race director's like, sure, go right ahead. And that's when the 100-mile races were born. So that really intrigued me, but I'm like, that's still crazy. I won't do that. And so I found a 50-mile race in the high Sierras in a town called Bishop. And so signed up for that, did some training runs up in Tahoe when I lived in the Bay Area. I think my longest run might have been around 25 miles. And then drove out to Bishop, where it was 100 degrees that day in late May, and finished 50 miles. And I'm like, I think I could go another 10 miles. So it was like a mental thing. So I finished that, and then I'm like, all right, well, now this one behind me doesn't seem too crazy. So a couple years later, after a few more races and kind of building a solid foundation, I put my name in the hat, and I was picked in the lottery, and I got to run that race as well. It was pretty special to be able to do that. Now, if you try to get in that race, if you have one ticket, your odds are 0.0001%, because everyone around the world wants to be in this race. So each year you get double your tickets. So you get 1 ticket for 1 year, 2 tickets for 2 years, then 4, 8. So there's people that are been accumulating tickets. So they might be running 8 years, 10 years before they get in. Got in with 1 ticket. I didn't think I was going to get it. I don't focus too many on hundreds anymore. My focus is on 50K races and 50-mile races, which are more manageable with family and so forth, because that part takes discipline, right? Like, you're up at 4:30 in the mornings on a Saturday because you don't want your whole weekend to go by. So I'm done by, if I go out for a 5-hour training run and I'm back by 9:30, I'm with the kids, and there's no just passing out on the couch, right? You're back to your daily routine. So
how long does a 100-mile race take?
For me, the fastest was 20 hours and 30 minutes. This one was 28 hours and 30 minutes. It was a
You
cold
must get a break in that.
Huh?
You must get a break in the middle.
I mean, the clock doesn't stop. So you have 30 hours to finish this race, Western States. But yeah. And then my wife, she now has the household record. Last year, she ran a 100-mile race here called the Umstead 100 in 19 hours and change. So she's got me by over an hour.
Blacker, you gotta get up your game there, Tony. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's
that's
she knows how
an
to suffer.
incredible amount of dedication of time that you must be putting into this in order to be able to be in the shape to do that kind of an event. How do you balance that with family and work? It's got to be pretty challenging.
So if the build up to a race can become challenging, right? We, especially like when we're both doing it, it's trying to find out when we're going to get out and do our runs. The midweek runs are no different than probably what you would see for a marathon training. It's nothing too crazy. So my weekly mileage, not to get too technical here, on average is probably throughout the year is roughly between 40 and 50 miles a week. And I run probably 6 days a week, but only one of those days I'm running with any kind of considerable effort. Everything else is zone 2, just building the base. And then as we get to a race, you're building up, and then you might have longer runs. And that's where those 4:30 in the morning calls, you wake up and go out. Or if I go out at 5 a.m., working from home helps, right? So if I'm out at 5 a.m., 5:30, I'm back at the house 7:30. Kids are getting up, we get them fed and get them in the car and take them to school. Right. So, it works. And then we take turns in certain aspects. And there's just when we're training for a race at the same time. But it's not as easy, but you have to be disciplined, right? You're like, I'm not going to go do that run at 10 a.m. on a Saturday and be gone for 5 hours. It's just not going to happen. I don't want to do that. Right. That's my time with my kids.
Yeah, so as much as you may want to get away, that's a pretty significant chunk of change. But it's been influential on your overall success. Now, for folks that are watching that are like, I want to be successful like Tony, what would you recommend as being like maybe the one thing that they should be focusing on? Obviously, not ultra long distance running is not for everybody, but what would you maybe suggest to somebody who's looking to try and up their game and be more successful in today's market?
I look back at kind of what made me successful. I'm not the best presenter. I'm not super slick, all the fancy words, but I try to come across as authentic and caring and build relationships. That's who I sell and make sure they're taken care of. I feel like that and being truly honest and, really focus on what their pains are. By doing that, I feel like I've been successful. I've maintained relationships with customers, business partners, but nowadays relationship selling is absolutely 100% the most important thing in nurturing those relationships. To me, that's what made me successful, and continue to be that way. Probably that's, I'd highlight that. Yeah. Focus on relationship selling.
I can, having sold with you and gone to a number of the strategic accounts that you used to manage when we were working together, I can attest to your dedication to the success of the customer and how you would always put them first and be their advocate internally. And it always struck me. And I was always impressed by that, and as being part of your personal way of engaging sales and customer success.
Yeah, I have customers that I sold to 10 years ago that I still keep in touch. And then others that I sold 5 years ago, that, check in from time to time.
Yeah, I think the authenticity is a big thing, when you're talking about sales, because, obviously going way back, it's like everyone thinking used car salesperson, very unauthentic, very cheesy, et cetera. And that somehow that idea still persists in sales in people's minds.
That's stereotype.
Yeah. But I think the enterprise sellers that I've worked with over the years, almost everyone to the T has been very authentic in trying to do the best for their customers as well as company. And that comes across. And I don't think you could really be successful in enterprise sales because of the long-term relationships that you develop if you're not authentic, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's really good.
It's building that trust. Yeah, I might not know the answers, but I'll bring you guys to the call, right? Or, whoever else, an executive, and try to be that quarterback of the deal. But just the trust factor is just so important, especially with the type of deals nowadays where you're not one and done, right? You're having to keep proving yourself to get that 2-year extension down the road. So having that trust through that whole process pays dividends.
Well, Tony, I wish we could talk for the rest of the day, but unfortunately we can't. If people wanted to connect with you to find out more about your personal philosophy when it comes to selling, some of your past successes, or if they do want to reach out and find out more about ultra long distance running, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, if they want to ping me on LinkedIn, got that active. I think we all do now, where the notifications just pop up left and right. So I'm not ignoring it. I'll be able to see it. So I think that's probably the best route if you want to connect. I talk about ultra running all day long.
Yeah, I can sense your passion about it. Matt, we're coming up to the end of our episode today. What would you kind of like to cover before we go and shut things down?
I think we're good. It's been a pleasure, Tony.
You as well.
Yeah, talking with you again and seeing you again. And I wish you all the success. Thanks for being on.
Appreciate it.
And, if I were to think back about one of the things that sticks out the most about our conversation this afternoon, it was your comment about authenticity. That's a common theme we hear when we're talking to anybody who's had a really impressive and successful career. That dedication to authenticity and honesty is just foundational to having a successful career. Having worked with you, I can say that those are definitely 2 words that I would use to describe you. And It's definitely been a privilege working with you in the past, and it's been a privilege talking with you this afternoon. Really appreciate you coming in and spending a little bit of time with Matt and I.
Appreciate it. Bye.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that does bring us to a close for today's episode. If you have any thoughts, please share them in the comments. If you don't want to leave them in the comment section, you can go to our website and connect with us there. There's a contact sheet on our website. Whatever it is you guys think you need, please reach out. We'd be happy to see you. But until then, folks, thank you for spending a little bit of time with us here. leave a comment, leave a like, leave a follow, and we'll see you again next time right here. Take care, everyone.